Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TeeTalk. I am your host, Tamori Richardson. Thank you if you are continuing to follow our journey on TeeTalk. We talk about everything from mental health, business, economics, family structure, and so forth. So again, we have brought to you an amazing guest this week. This is a conversation that is so necessary and needed. But before we get started, I want to make sure if you are not a subscriber, look at the bottom of your bar, hit subscribe. It'll let you know when we have wonderful episodes that are coming that are going to be of interest to you. And we want to encourage you to comment. We love your comments, your feedback, your suggestions. So please make sure that you do that. Again, I'm Tamori Richardson, international motivational speaker, 4-time international best-selling author, TeeTalk coach, and expert business coach, bringing you necessary conversation. So this wonderful Monday, today happens to be President's Day as well. We have a beautiful guest with us, Janet Stickman. Janet Stickman is a professor, author, wellness consultant, and educator trainer who has been teaching for over 25 years. Janet Stickman is a professor of ethnic studies at Napa Valley College and the author of Crushing Soft Rubies, a memoir, Midnight Peaches, 2 O'Clock Patience, a collection of essays, poems, and short stories on womanhood and the spirit, and to Black parents visiting Earth, raising Black children in the 21st century. Stickman's essays are featured in the Huffington Post, Mutha Magazine, Read to Write Stories, Positively Filipino, Red and Yellow, Black and Brown, Decentering Whiteness and Mixed Race Studies, and the Sage Encyclopedia of Filipina, American Studies. She has 25 years practicing meditation and integrating mindfulness practices into her courses. Janet Stickman is the founder of CenterJoyPWR, Strategies for Healing Racial Battle Fatigue, a program designed for professionals of color who want to center joy in their lives. Welcome, welcome, Professor Stickman.
Thank you so much, Tamari. So wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Just so you guys know that Professor Stickman actually was my professor at Napa Valley College. Besides the fact she is ultimately amazing, her education and knowledge in the areas of this background of healing racial battle fatigue and ethnic studies is so crucial, especially this being Black History Month, which, as we know, is also American history. So I am beyond honored to have her here for that, such a great representation of our culture as well. So thank you so much for being here with us, and let's get into it.
I'm ready.
I think the audience wants to know, what is CenterJoyPWR? That's something that you have created.
Yes. So CenterJoyPWR, Strategies for Healing Racial Battle Fatigue, is basically a self-paced 6-week online program that I designed for professionals of color to help them step into their healing process as they begin to heal and understand their own experience of racial battle fatigue and try to reconnect with their joy, reconnect with their experience of joy, both in their personal and the professional lives.
Excellent. So I think most of the audience and our listeners will probably want to know, why did you feel that there was a need for such a type of program in today's society?
Well, this program was definitely born out of my own personal experience, both as a high school teacher many years ago, and then later as a professor of ethnic studies, and some of the different racial and gender microaggressions that I would experience routinely. And I didn't realize until several years later that it was taking a toll on my emotional well-being, on my physical well-being. And when I found myself in the ER 2 times within the span of 4 years, I realized, something has to change. Something really has to change. And I remember the first time I went to the ER, it was due to chest pain and heart palpitations, and I was grinding my teeth, all these different things. And I went to the ER, they took all these different tests, They found that the results of the test were normal, and I was very happy about that. And I looked at the doctor. I said, I'm really happy that all the tests came out normal, but what do you attribute all this, pain to? And he looked at me and he said, well, how's work? And I burst into tears. And he and I both knew what the answer was and knew what the next step needed to be. And so that was the beginning. That was around 2016. That was the beginning of my healing process and trying to figure out, well, if this is what is causing it, well, then how do I reconnect to, what brings me peace, what brings me joy, the things that I genuinely love and make me excited to be out of bed in the morning.
Excellent. I think the more education that we get and the more that we experience life, we are learning that racism has lasting effects. Yes. Dealing with it, being the recipient of racism has lasting effects. So, I'd like to know, what is racial battle fatigue?
So racial battle fatigue is a term coined by Dr. William A. Smith around 2006. He's a scholar out of the University of Utah. And he uses the term to address the physiological, the behavioral, the psychological strain that is experienced by people of color as we use energy to deal with and fight against racism. And it is something that really takes a toll over time. And one of the things that I think is important to understand about racial battle fatigue is that there's a distinction between it and racism-related stress. It's the racism-related stress that gives rise to the racial battle fatigue. And so when one experiences, whether it be racial microaggressions or racial macroaggressions, the stress response would be a combination of psychological, physiological, and behavioral. And those things are intertwined as we look at racial battle fatigue.
That's excellent. I mean, that's amazing. I can't even put that into words, how important that is to really examine the life that we are living.
Yes, yes.
Now, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, it really helps us to as you say, re-examine the life that we're living and how we're living it, what we're exposing ourselves to, and how, that constant exposure to racism can, shorten our lifespans.
Yeah, absolutely. Racism is a big word. It's a big word that can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. Can you give us some examples that would fall under the geyser of racial battle fatigue?
Yes. And so if I can take a step back and just look at a definition of racism, racism being a system of advantage based on race that is really bolstered by white supremacy. And so I think it's important to have that as a common understanding. Two, looking at microaggressions, I like to use the definition of Daryl Wing Sue and how he talks about it being, those everyday verbal and nonverbal slights, snubs, insults that, are used to target someone from a particular marginalized group. And often at times it's done unintentionally, but just because it's done unintentionally doesn't mean that it doesn't cause harm. And I think that's a key thing, that, looking at microaggressions, it's the accumulation of those tiny little cuts over time that just leaves one drenched in blood. And I think that gets ignored because sometimes not only ignored by the perpetrator of whatever is said or done, but sometimes ignored or dismissed by us as people of color because we're thinking, oh, that wasn't such a big thing. Oh, maybe they didn't mean it. They usually are a pretty good person, but really it takes a toll. And so we need to make sure that we take a look at it. Now, as far as examples of the stress responses under this umbrella of racial battle fatigue, when it comes to the psychological stress response, it could be anything from experiencing fear, worrying all the time, being hypervigilant, always anxious, physiological, being, I think I mentioned already, the chest pain, heart palpitations, grinding one's teeth, high blood pressure, gastrointestinal, I mean, the list goes on. Mm-hmm. And then behavioral, anything from being quick to argue and just kind of withdrawing from other people, maybe an increase in use of alcohol or smoking or drugs, things of that nature.
Excellent, excellent. One thing that I get ultimately frustrated with, I get really tired of people telling me how well I articulate.
That's
as if I'm supposed to be grunting and not able to use syllables.
Right.
We read, and right. Therefore we know how to speak.
Yeah, and they walk away thinking it's a compliment, and no, it hurts. It reminds me of something a friend of mine said many years ago, and he wasn't referring to microaggressions back then, but he was referring to the idea of these insults that that feel a little bit strange. And he said, when people say these things, it's hard to tell whether or not I've been kicked or kissed. And
that's right.
That always stayed with me. And I think it's a really good way of understanding how a microaggression feels to someone from a marginalized group, whether it be a microaggression based on race, gender, sexual orientation, or what have you.
What I like what you said also is that oftentimes, because either we get so desensitized to it, it's the norm for us that we marginalize a slight. Well, it wasn't, or maybe they didn't, but a slight is a slight is a slight.
Yeah.
And still should be called out.
Yeah. It should be called out, and there should be consequences.
Absolutely. So now, if we're healing racial battle fatigue, who is this for? Like, who specifically are we centering this to, and who needs to get this information?
CenterJoyPWR is designed first and foremost to be for people of color, and specifically professionals of color in any industry. It's also it's for those within that circle of professionals of color who are emotionally and physically drained. They're burnt out, they're stuck, they're feeling stuck or feeling trapped. It could be any of those feelings, or it may not even be so severe. They may just be feeling like, I need a safe place where I can be vulnerable and be in the presence of other professionals of color who value self-care, but also understand how different systems of oppression can get in the way and prevent us from really being who we are meant to be in this world. Right. And, it's also designed for those who have a tendency at being better at nurturing other people than themselves, and may feel guilty about doing good things for themselves, or may feel guilty when they experience joy. And so I find that with a lot of the clients that I've worked with, that is all of these different qualities are a common thread.
Absolutely. And really weighs on you, and not knowing exactly what you're dealing with. Like, this puts a name to it.
Yes.
Because fatigue, aren't we tired of it yet? Like, this puts a legitimate name to this.
Yes.
I love it.
I completely agree. And I think, I've had the honor and pleasure of crossing paths with Dr. Smith. And one of the things that I expressed to him was how freeing it was to see a term that gives a name for the things that I was experiencing for how many years. It really just kind of shined a light on the very thing that I thought, for a particular amount of time, I thought it was in my head. And so to have, I feel a bit conflicted. On one hand, most certainly, I'm very happy that there is a term that exposes what we've experienced. And then on the flip side, it's heartbreaking because this means that the phenomenon is so prevalent that it has to have a name. And so, I feel conflicted, but nonetheless, yes, it is so important that the research is out there.
Yeah. Now, as important as this is for people of color, how instrumental is or can this be for individuals who are not of African American or Black American descent? Yeah. How beneficial is this?
Well, I think if one is a person of color but is not of African American descent, CenterJoyPWR most certainly still is for them. Now, if one is white and is an ally or aspires to be an ally, then it becomes important to create spaces so that programs like this are made available to, say, their employees of color, whether it be, individually, whatever, ranking they may be within the business or the nonprofit. But it's also important for, let's say, employee resource groups, employee assistance programs that would be offered by, the human resource department. I think those who are white allies in positions of power, positions of leadership or authority, can really begin to look at their workplace environment and understand that, even though this particular program that I've designed targets professionals of color and really helps us to heal and reconnect with our joy, there is a particular responsibility that the workplace has to create a safe environment, to create a healthy environment that prioritizes the wellness of its employees of color. And, I say this because, there's a lot of talk out there with regards to increasing representation, making sure that there are more people of color in various professions, various roles within, whether it be business, nonprofit, educational institution, et cetera. And all of that I most certainly agree with, but there also has to be energy placed in the area of what is it that particular workplace is doing to allow those people of color to want to stay. There has to be a certain amount of energy, a large amount of energy placed in nurturing, fostering an environment that is healthy for people of color, that believes us when we bring particular grievances, particular racial microaggressions that happen within the workplace, that we're believed and we don't experience gaslighting, that our boundaries are respected, that we're not exploited. Often at times as people of color, we're exploited, especially during a particular ethnic history month. Like right now, Black History Month, I know that many of us as African Americans, you'll have so many people trying to turn to us and, ask us all these different questions about Black history, and on one hand, okay, wonderful. You have demonstrated an interest in who we are and our contributions in American history. But I think the fact that may be an expectation that we are readily available to be a Black lexicon,
right,
to answer any and all questions at the behest of whoever it is that may be crossing our paths. I think that is disrespectful, and so I think that there has to be some understanding of some understanding and respect of our boundaries.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've ever had anyone attempt to connect this with implicit bias training, but I see the difference. I mean, I see the huge difference between implicit bias and racial battle fatigue. But can you please give a little bit of light to that?
Sure, sure. I think implicit bias or unconscious bias certainly has its place when one is, on their journey of, healing one's racial battle fatigue. But I must say that specifically, if we're talking about unconscious bias of white allies, for instance, that it becomes so very important for those who are white that have a commitment to doing their part in dismantling racism.
Right.
I think that it is important for them to say, okay, let me sit with my biases, allow those unconscious biases to rise to the level of consciousness, so that there is less of a likelihood for those biases to become microaggressions that will hurt people of color.
Mm.
And so I think it's very important for white allies to engage in that work, because there's an imbalance if it's only the folks of color that are trying to heal, and reconnect with our joy. But if on the other side of the scale, no work is being done to address white supremacy, because racial battle fatigue won't go away if white supremacy doesn't go away.
Right.
Racism itself doesn't go away. But at the same time, as a woman of color, I'm not going to wait around for white supremacy to go away. I know it's not going to go away anytime soon. But listen, I ain't going away anytime soon either. None of us
That's
are.
right.
So since I plan on being around for a while, I want to make sure that I'm living a beautiful life that I enjoy.
Love it.
And
Absolutely.
creating a space for other people to do the same.
Absolutely. And like you said, this isn't something that's only for anyone of color can benefit from this. And I think this is important for allies as well, or individuals trying to even understand, what are we talking about? What do we have an issue with? And like you said, we oftentimes get tired of educating, but we do have to educate. This is something that we have to do if we want people to understand. But so I want to get into your course. Please tell us a little bit about your course, because I want the audience to jump in and get involved with it.
Oh, sure.
Sign up.
So the course, it started off in 2020. It was a live virtual program, and it bounced between 4 weeks and 5 weeks as I was, trying to figure things out. But this is when I realized, there are other folks out there that I think can benefit from a space like this. And then after, there were roughly about 3 cohorts that successfully completed the program since 2020, I decided to take that program and turn it into a fully online experience. Mm-hmm. So basically, it is comprised of 6 weekly online modules that are available on Thinkific. And we go through all these different weekly milestones, from exploring what joy is and what it means to us. I'd like to start there first, and then get into definitions of racism-related stress, racial battle fatigue, and how those things impact our health. We address how to reverse negative self-talk and negativity bias of the brain, and get into the neuroscience behind all of that, and explore affirmations. I offer a couple of frameworks to help us to begin to chisel away at the harm that racial battle fatigue has done to us. We also create an opportunity to shift our idea of what abundance is. And so I have the participants create a perfect ordinary day. If you had all the time in the world, all the resources in the world, what would your perfect ordinary day look like? And that perfect ordinary day being a one-day thank you gift to yourself, to help you to understand that we are always worthy of our own self-love and doing things that bring us joy, and we're worthy of putting ourselves at the top of our own to-do list. We're so good, we'll be really efficient at knocking things off of our to-do list, but then we turn around and realize we were nowhere on that to-do list, and
right.
and we look in the mirror and we discovered that we may not recognize ourselves anymore. And so the perfect ordinary day helps to shift that idea of abundance. We also get into creating an enhanced vision board that really not only engages the sense of sight, but engages, the sense of smell and hearing and things of that nature. And then all of this feeds into how we create our own set of rituals, our own set of baby steps that have meaning, not simply just a routine that can get old, but a set of rituals that have meaning that really help us to feel alive. I define joy as that which makes our eyes light up and our spirit smile. Yes. And if we are engaging in a set of rituals that helps us to feel that, experience that a little bit every day, as if joy is a daily vitamin, then we're less likely to find ourselves in the ER wondering, what the hell did I do with my life?
Right. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. This is absolutely wonderful. At the end of our podcast, we will have a slide that'll pop up with all of Professor Stickman's information. This is an important conversation. It's important for us how to take care of ourselves, how to acknowledge, how to recognize. And I think definitely this course puts us on the pathway, but also for allies, for those who, and maybe if you're not even really understanding what racial battle fatigue and how you might be contributing to it.
Yep.
That's essential as well. Once you know, then you can do better. So this was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you joining me on this episode of TeeTalk. We will have all of your information at the end so that the viewers can contact you, reach out. Please sign up for the Racial Battle Fatigue course. I think this is very important. The Center Joy, this is wonderful. I love this. And I think it's important for Black people specifically to continue to empower ourselves and find ways to nurture all those good things about us. And as you said, remind ourselves that we're worth it and we're worthy of it. So thank you so much. I will see you guys on our next episode of TeeTalk. Professor Stickman, did you want to have the last word?
I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to connecting with you and any of those out there who are listening. And folks can follow me, whether it be, you can visit my website, janetstickman.com. You can also follow me on Instagram, also at janetstickman.com. And you can stay up to date with some of the latest events and offerings that I have.
Excellent. And we'll make sure all that information comes up next. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Bye-bye.